We are so excited to be kicking things off tonight with the wonderful Ben White. Ben is a sales rep for Macmillan Publishers in New England, born and raised in Cambridge, Mass. After graduating from Columbia, he worked at an independent bookstore in Brooklyn before getting a job in publishing. Ben worked for Macmillan in their New York City offices for 15 years before transitioning to his current job in 2016, jumping at the chance to move back to New England and work with the best independent bookstores in the country. So without further ado, please give a warm digital screen time welcome to Ben White. Take it away, Ben.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming tonight and for supporting RJ Julia. Since you're here, you probably already know this, but I want to emphasize to you how special RJ Julia is. My job is to know all the bookstores in New England, and they're the best bookstores in the country per capita by far. I think there's kind of murderer's row of great bookstores. But even in that company, I would say RJ Julia is probably the best. Just the level of service they provide, the level of knowledge their booksellers have, their engagement with their community is really, it's really something special. And I'm not just kissing up when I say that. So thank you for shopping with them, and please keep it up, because we all need them. They make the world and the community a better place. So let me tell you about some books. I'm going to just tell you about some of the kind of big blockbusters we have coming out this fall, which it's a big fall for us, and I think in publishing in general. And then I'm also going to talk about some books that are out already, and a few smaller books that might be sleeper hits or just that are favorites of mine. So first up, we have Oliver Burkeman's 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals. So this came out about a month ago, and it's been doing really nicely. It's got great reviews, and it's been on the New York Times bestseller list for several weeks. It's kind of a self-help book. He does have some advice, but you could just as easily call it an anti-self-help book. The title references the fact that if we live to be 80 years old, we have 4,000 weeks of life. It's not really a lot of time, and we have so much that we have to do and want to do. But this book is really kind of arguing against the whole category of advice about how to be more productive and efficient and life hacks and inbox zero and all that stuff. He's saying that, a lot of this advice, paying too much attention to it, really kind of makes things worse. He's really humorous. He's kind of delightfully entertaining writer, and he's just kind of taking a common sense look at the history of this idea of time management, and kind of poking a little fun at it, but also has some kind of very gentle suggestions that are actually good tips. Like one thing he says is that the quote is that the real measure of any time management technique is whether or not it helps you neglect the right things, which I think is true. And he also talks a lot about how the fear of missing out is kind of guaranteed, and that self-help experts who tell you never to settle are kind of ignoring the fact that everything is always settling. Every job you take is by definition not another job, so you're always missing out. And so it's got some great advice like that. It's just filled with great humor and wisdom that will help you relax and be a little less stressed out. It's great for any of the kind of overscheduled, stressed out people in your life, whether that's you or people you love. And I would say it's an equally great gift for people who read lots of self-help books, and also for people who wouldn't be caught dead reading a self-help book. And then next up, I want to talk about the new book from one of our very top star authors, Louise Penny. The Madness of Crowds is number 17 in Louise Penny's series featuring Chief Inspector Gamache, who's a detective with the Montreal Sûreté. Her books they're mostly set in and around this fictional little idyllic village near Montreal called Three Pines. There's a great cast of kind of small town characters who have kind of become like family to readers of this series over the course of the books. Gamache is one of the great fictional detectives of all time, I think. I would argue that this is the best mystery series currently running, and it would certainly make any short list of the best series of all times. Penny is just a wonderful writer. Her prose is wonderful. Her characters are wonderful. There's great food writing in these books. A lot of people like that. Lots of great kind of descriptions of meals and cooking. They're just extraordinary. I'm guessing that if you are already into Louise Penny, you might have already bought this book. But if you haven't, now is the time to buy it with this discount. But if you've never read Penny, you may not want to start with book 17 in the series. But what I suggest is that you buy the first few books in the series, or even just the first book, and try it out and get started. And I promise you, it will hook you. Or even if you're already on board, buy the first couple for a friend, and kind of give them the gift of this wonderful world of Three Pines. It's one of my favorite things is to get new people hooked on this series. When I run into a bookseller who doesn't know the series, I just love it because I send them a little package of the first couple books, and I don't think I've ever failed to get somebody hooked on it. To that end, the raffle they mentioned earlier, we're going to raffle off any three books of the earlier books in the series to anyone who makes a purchase here. And so that way, if you haven't read the series, you can start it out, or if you have read it, you can send them to a friend. I'll mail them to a friend, and you can give the gift to them. So if you're already a convert, so. That is Louise Penny and The Madness of Crowds, the new book out now. Next up is another big blockbuster. This one went on sale last Tuesday. You may have already heard about it. It's been all over the media. It's shaping up to be kind of the book of the fall. We're waiting to hear the official word, but it should be #1 on the New York Times bestseller list for the first week on sale. And this, of course, is Sally Rooney's novel, Beautiful World, Where Are You? Sally Rooney is one of the hottest writers of the past 10 years. She's the author of 2 previous books, Normal People and Conversations with Friends, which were critically acclaimed, major bestsellers. You may have seen the adaptation of Normal People on Hulu. She's really been kind of anointed as the literary voice of the millennial generation, I guess. I always feel a little bad for writers who get that kind of designation, because it's a lot to live up to, a lot of pressure. But I think the shoe really fits here. And it's, this is the first book she's published with Macmillan. We kind of stole her away from her previous publisher. And so this was the first book I had read by her. And I went into it pretty skeptical. There was so much hype about the first 2 books that I was kind of like, well, it can't be all as good as that, and millennials, I don't know. And I was just blown away. She is a major talent. So this book follows 4 friends. It's 2 young women who are best friends from college, and the 2 men who they are kind of dating on and off. And it just sort of follows the course of their friendships and relationships. There's never exactly a love triangle, but their relationships kind of shift back and forth between romantic and not romantic. And then all the while, kind of underneath, she's kind of subtly showing the way in which all these big problems of our contemporary world kind of creep into their lives. So global warming, the pandemic, income inequality. I have trouble pitching this book because I feel like I make it sound boring, but the mark of a great writer, I think, is how they can show life as it really is and make it riveting and profound. And she really has that kind of skill. A lot of this book is told through emails between the 2 friends and text messages and other kind of electronic communications. The characters are on their phones all the time, just like people are in real life. They're texting each other, even on dating apps. And it's really hard to make that kind of stuff dynamic and interesting, and Rooney is able to do it. And I think that's why she's the voice of her generation. She's able to make art from the way that people actually live their lives today. And also she writes great sex scenes, which to me is maybe the only thing that is harder to do than writing like a great text message scene. So this is really an extraordinary book. I think it's the book of the fall, and I think Sally Rooney is going to be going to maintain her status as the writer of her generation. Okay, next up is LA Weather by Maria Amparo Escandon, who this also went on sale last Tuesday, and we just had some big news about it, which is that Reese Witherspoon has just chosen it as the next book for book club, which, as you probably know, is a big deal. There are a lot of celebrity book clubs now, and they all kind of help to sell books and bring attention, but I would say Reese and still Oprah are the two that can really make a book in a big way. And I just want to say, for the record, I didn't know it was coming. I picked this out to talk to you about weeks ago, before I knew that Reese was going to pick it. So I think, in fact, Reese may be following my lead. So this is LA Weather is a big, fun, kind of big-hearted family saga with a juicy plot. It's also a kind of a love letter to Los Angeles. It's one of the best Los Angeles novels I've read in a long time, and you definitely don't need to have a special interest in LA to write it. It's just, but it will make you want to go to LA, really. It revolves around a wealthy Mexican American family, the Alvarados, and the father, the kind of patriarch, Oscar, is descended from a ranching family that's owned land in California since it was part of Mexico. His wife, Lila, comes from a Jewish family that fled the Holocaust to settle in Mexico City. And their Oscar's been a kind of very high-powered, successful businessman, but he's kind of had this life crisis, and he can't really focus on anything except the weather. He's obsessed with when it's going to rain next. They're in this drought, and he spends all day watching the Weather Channel, just walking around looking at the sky. And the story starts off with this near tragedy where their grandchildren almost drown in their pool, seemingly because he wasn't paying attention. And this kind of sets off a chain of events where Lila, his wife, announces to their grown daughters that she is going to divorce Oscar. And they all the daughters all spring into action and convince her to give it 1 year before she makes the decision. So this is the kind of ticking clock on the novel. And the daughters are all kind of strong-willed, high-powered in their own right. One's an architect, one's a celebrity chef. And over the course of the year, as they're trying to save their parents' marriage, they start to question their own marriages and life choices. So there are all these different things going on. It's actually partly, the author wrote it partly as an homage to the Mexican telenovelas, the kind of soap operas on Mexican TV. So it's not a soap opera, but it has all these different kind of strands going on. And it's just, yeah, really fun, fast-paced, smart book. And it's I would say, for readers of Emma Straub or Leanne Moriarty, who we'll be talking about next. And it would be a great book club book, or it's just a fun book to curl up with on a Saturday afternoon. And I would say even, especially maybe later on in the fall or the winter when you have New England weather going on outside, it'd be nice to curl up with LA weather. Next up, I want to talk about Apples Never Fall, the new Leanne Moriarty. This is another major blockbuster. This goes on sale tomorrow, so you can have it in your hands right away. And it's, of course, the new book from Leanne Moriarty, author of Big Little Lies and Nine Perfect Strangers, which is the TV adaptation of Nine Perfect Strangers is just premiered on Hulu. And you may have seen the Big Little Lies on HBO. And she is just the master of what we in the business kind of call the domestic thriller, and just one of the great storytellers writing today. Like Big Little Lies, which I think is her most famous book, this starts out at the climax of the mystery, starts out setting up the mystery, and then goes back in time to unravel how we got there. So it's about the disappearance of a 69-year-old woman That kind of starts it off, and then we go back in time to this moment when a mysterious young woman had arrived on she and her husband's doorstep, and then kind of move forward from there. There's clues and red herrings that gradually kind of build up until the final twist, and when you find out what's behind her disappearance. So this should be a #1 bestseller, and everyone is especially going to be talking about Liane Moriarty this fall because of the new Hulu show. And by the way, 9 Perfect Strangers is, of course, available in trade paperback now if you haven't read it. Okay, next up, I want to talk about Crossroads. This is the new novel from Jonathan Franzen. You may know Franzen as the author of The Corrections or Freedom. He's generally considered one of the greatest living American novelists, and I think this book is really going to kind of confirm that. It's his first book in 5 years. I really think it's his best book since The Corrections, which was the book that kind of made him famous 20 years ago, exactly, 2001. This book is the start of what is going to be a trilogy about a middle-class Midwestern American family over the course of 5 decades. This one is set in the early 70s, and it kind of goes over 1 year from Christmas season until Easter, and introduces us to this family, the Hildebrandt family, and kind of switching back and forth between each of the family members and jumping back and forth in time to gradually kind of introduce us to each character's story and how they all fit together. The father is a minister in a local church, and he is kind of flirting with an affair and having a sort of loss of faith after he lost control of the youth group at his church to this kind of hipper younger man who's almost kind of stealing his children away from him, his children's loyalty. And then his wife, the kind of matriarch of the family, is dealing with a kind of return to this mental illness that almost ruined her life as a young woman. And then there's one son who wants to leave college and run to Vietnam to rebel. There's another son who is the local pot dealer, but is also a genius. And he's kind of trying to go straight and become a good person. And then there's the daughter who is really embracing her father's church at the time her father's drawing away from it, and it's kind of finding her first love there. So that's a whole mouthful, but Franzen is really a master at creating these believable, fully rounded characters and plotting these big family stories. And he's also gotten really good at dialogue. We had kind of a Zoom meet and greet with him a few months ago, and he was talking about how he'd been writing the screenplay for HBO was doing a version of The Corrections and ultimately got shelved, but he had written the scripts for the whole series. And so he said it really taught him a lot about how to use dialogue effectively and how to write the way people really talk. So I think he has improved even over his earlier kind of masterworks. And I think this, along with the Sally Rooney, this is going to be one of the literary novels of the fall that everybody's talking about and get nominated for all the big awards. And yeah, I think both of those are authors that people are still going to be reading in 50 years. Okay, next up I have Three Sisters by Heather Morris. She's the author of The Tattooist of Auschwitz and Silka's Journey. She calls this the third book in a trilogy that's kind of formed with those 2 books. But it's a very loose trilogy. The books are all Holocaust stories set around Auschwitz, but the main characters kind of overlap here and there, but that's really it. You don't need to have read the earlier books. You could just read this one on its own. And it's loosely based on a true story of these 3 sisters who survived Auschwitz and managed to escape the final death march that the Nazis led away from the camp as the Allies closed in. And then they made their way to Israel, where they had to kind of start a new life and deal with the horrors that they had been through. And the book came about when one of the actual sisters who it's based on reached out to Heather Morris after The Tattooist had been published and wanted to tell her story and said, listen, I want you to tell my story in a book. And so it was written with the cooperation of the 2 surviving sisters, of these 3 sisters. And so we, Tattooist of Auschwitz has been a mega bestseller, huge book club book, and we expect this one will only improve on that. Next up, we have, a wonderful literary novel called Fight Night by Miriam Taves. She is just a beautiful, funny, kind of saintly writer. I went to a dinner with her once, and she just has this this kind of aura around her that's amazing. And she writes like a saint too. She grew up in a Mennonite community in Canada, and her books often have some kind of connection to Mennonites, but they are the farthest thing from old-fashioned. They are funny and irreverent and very modern and just so smart. And Fight Night is about 3 generations of women living in one household. It's a single mother who's a working actress and kind of struggles with depression. And then there's her daughter named Swiv, that's her nickname, she's very precocious and very strange. And then the third woman is the grandmother, and she is kind of getting to the end of her life, but still full of energy and humor, and is the child's main caretaker. You get a little bit of their backstory. You can tell that they at one point lived in a Mennonite community that was kind of restrictive to women, and they kind of escaped from that. You don't get a lot of detail. But the kind of heart of the book is that the grandmother and Swiv, the little girl, end up going on an adventure together. I think they live in Toronto, and they go on a trip to California. And it's just so tender and funny and beautiful. It's one of my favorite personal dynamics in books or movies. The kind of sassy grandmother and the precocious child. There's just something about that dynamic that I love, and it's just done to perfection here. It's told in the voice of the daughter, Swiv, but she's kind of always parroting these adult phrases and jokes that she hears from her mother and her grandmother. So it's this really interesting, funny voice. It's childlike, but it's saying these very funny adult things. I just fell in love with these characters and these voices, and it's a special book. And Miriam Taves is a special talent. I know I keep saying that, but we have a lot of special books this fall. So now I'm going to talk about a few books that I'm kind of loosely grouping together as hopeful books or feel-good books, books that can make you feel hopeful even in this time when it seems like the world is not going so well. This has been a big trend in publishing throughout the pandemic. People looking for hopeful, feel-good books, and I don't know about you, but I'm still in the market for it. So first up, we have The Book of Hope by Dr. Jane Goodall. She's a primatologist. You've probably heard of her. She's the world's foremost expert in chimpanzees, but she's also become a kind of activist for peace and the real symbol of hope. And this is an inspirational book. She's basically talking about ways to view hope as a survival trait, as something that humanity has developed and adapted and evolved over the years, and that it's really what we need to survive. And she tells a lot of personal stories about her own early years and her activism, and then she also talks to a lot of kind of prominent experts who study hope, like psychologists, philosophers, and then she gives some kind of simple, practical measures that we can apply to our daily lives to help ourselves be more hopeful. And she's just a deeply inspirational figure, and it's a really simple but profound message. And she's 87 years old, still going strong. You're going to be seeing her all over the media talking about this book. So this is a great book to sit with when you're feeling down, and a great gift for anyone who needs a little pick-me-up. Now, another hopeful, or at least kind of feel-good book, a novel called This Is Happiness I know this is a big favorite of some people at RJ Julia. So if you've been shopping in the store, you may have already seen this with a kind of staff pick note on it, or maybe even had one of the booksellers talk it up to you. It's another really special book. It's set in a rural Irish parish village called Faha in the 1950s, but it feels even older. It's a village that has no electricity yet, and where the pace of life is really slow. And it's told from the point of view of an old man called Noah, who's looking back from the present day to his youth in the 1950s, when he at the age of 17, his mother has just died tragically, and he's been at the seminary in Dublin, and he drops out to go live with his grandparents in this little town, and it sort of helps him grieve. And this book is filled with great kind of eccentric small town characters, great stories, the kind you only get in a small town, and it just fills you with this sort of feeling of simpler times. One of my favorite reviews of this book I was looking at when I was preparing for this, and it got incredible reviews, but a quote from the Washington Post review said, "If you're in a hurry along to another book. The author is engaged in the careful labor of teaching us to hear the subtler melodies drowned out by the din of modern life." And I think that really sums up what it does. It's a really sweet book, but it's not corny or saccharine, because it has all these profound things to teach us about grief as well. It's been a huge word of mouth book. It's the kind of book that will turn you into an evangelist. You'll be buying copies for your 3 closest friends when you're done. So. Next, another feel-good book. This is a personal favorite of mine, A Psalm for the Wild-Built. This is a nice short book, a novella, and it's technically science fiction, but if you're not a science fiction person, please don't be turned off by that. Give this a shot. It's an example of, it's a kind of new emerging genre in science fiction, kind of a movement in arts and culture called solar punk, which kind of imagines a future where humanity has kind of figured out some of the big problems that are facing us. So it's rather than that kind of dystopian dark future that you so often see in kind of fictional representations of the future, this is a future where things kind of work out okay. And so our protagonist here is a tea monk who, it's this kind of small scale, mostly rural world with little towns, and the tea monks travel around from town to town in a wagon filled with all kinds of different tea. And the main character is non-gender binary, so they meet with people, and they kind of sit and get to know people in each town, and then they make a custom blend of tea just for that person based on what they think they need, and they sit and brew the tea for them and sit and talk to them and listen to their problems. And so they're kind of like a part shrink, part barista, part priest, part best friend. So this is the first thing I loved about this book. It's just, I mean, who doesn't want to either have or be a tea monk? And then our hero, they love this job, but they feel this need to go go explore this part of the world that is supposed to be off limits. Nobody's supposed to go into this kind of zone. And there they meet a robot. And in this world, there were intelligent machines hundreds of years ago, but they all left and kind of went to space. Nobody really knows why. And it turns out that this robot is still there in this off-limit zone, and the two of them become companions, and they set off to find this legendary monastery that's at the top of a mountain in this zone. So it's, describing this book, it makes it sound really out there and like it's a total turnoff for anybody who's not into science fiction, but it's really just this quiet, kind of simply told, joyful story, almost like a fable. And I don't know anybody who's read it who hasn't been totally captivated by it. And that also goes very much for the next book I'm talking about, The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. We had a lot of books do well during the early pandemic. People were buying a lot of books. But of all of them, I would say House on the Cerulean Sea is the one that's been a true word of mouth sensation. It struck a chord with so many people, and it helped a lot of people get through that early stage of the pandemic. It's a fantasy. It's about a group of kind of misfit children with magical powers who live on an island in an orphanage. They're kind of kept there because there's this bureaucracy called the department in charge of magical youth that thinks they're a danger to the world because of these powers that they have. But they've created this kind of wonderful found family there, and they're protected by this headmaster who helps them to learn that they don't have to be a danger to the world, that they don't have to be what the world says they are. They can just be who they are. And it's heartwarming and sentimental, and I guarantee you it will turn any bad day around. There's also a great love story in it. And again, you don't have to be a fantasy person. I know it sounds, woo-woo, but it's just a lovely book. I know hardcore literary snobs, and I am one who have been completely won over by this book. So this is out now in paperback, and TJ Klune's new book, Under the Whispering Door, comes out next Tuesday, so you can pre-order it now. And this is another feel-good kind of fable about a man who named Wallace, who he has died, but he refuses to believe that he's dead. And so he's delivered to a tea shop, tea again, run by a man named Hugo, who he runs this tea shop, and he doubles as the kind of ferryman of souls. And Hugo tells him he has 1 week to cross over, or he'll be stuck as a sort of ghost. And so he sets out to live the lifetime he always wanted to live in 7 days. It's, again, just kind of emotionally rich, funny, fun, sentimental, and will make you happy. And TJ Klune is a real rising star, and he's kind of carving out a niche for himself, writing this kind of imaginative, feel-good story. Okay, that's the end of my feel-good books. This next book, of all the ones I'm talking about tonight, is the one that I'm including purely just because I love it. This is probably my favorite nonfiction book we published this year. And that, yes, I'm a huge nerd. This will show you the kind of nerd I am. But Louis Menon's The Free World. This came out back in March in hardcover to incredible reviews. Menon is one of our most brilliant historians. He's a big-time professor at Harvard. He writes for the New Yorker. A lot of little pieces of this book have been running in the New Yorker magazine for the past 20 years. His last book was 20 years ago, The Metaphysical Club, and that one won the Pulitzer Prize. And I think this book will be a contender for all the major prizes this year, the Pulitzer and National Book Award and stuff. And it's a giant sweeping history of American art and culture from roughly the 40s through the 60s, and how it sort of set the tone for the rest of the world. And he just pulls in everybody from Jackson Pollock to James Baldwin to Elvis to the Beatles to Susan Sontag, and on and on and on. Everybody who was anybody in kind of mid-century culture. And he gives you the kind of cliff notes of who they were and how they shaped the culture, how they fit together with the other people. So it's a great introduction to people maybe you learned about sometime, but you've forgotten about, or maybe you've been pretending to know about these people your whole life, but you never really knew. That's the case with me. And so it's a good introduction, but the other great thing about it is that if you already know a lot about these people or these movements, he will make you think about them and what they mean in a new way. For example, there's a chapter on Elvis and the Beatles, and I swear I never thought I would ever want to read another word about either of those people. They've been done to death. But he really gave me a new perspective on them and on what rock and roll means. So I keep saying to people, this book is like that course in college that everybody wanted to take. It was the best professor, the coolest topic. There's always a waiting list for it, and you had to keep trying. But maybe when you were a senior, you would get in. But it was totally worth it when you actually take it. This book is like that experience between covers. And just one other thing, it's 800 pages, which is pretty daunting, but you don't actually have to. You can jump around, read one chapter and put it down, just read the chapters on the people you're interested in. You don't have to read the whole thing, so don't be daunted by the length. Okay, on a lighter note, I would just want to talk about two really cool gift books, the Antiquarian sticker books. The first one came out last year and became a kind of viral sensation and a big bestseller. And its sequel, Antiquarian sticker book, Bibliophilia, is coming out next week. And the pitch for these books is they're something that's never been done before. They're coffee table sticker books. They're these beautiful hardcovers, and they're filled with hundreds of these beautifully produced stickers. They're all taken from original, mostly kind of Victorian prints and artwork. And I know that sounds a little crazy. I remember when I was presenting the first book to bookstores, there was a lot of skepticism. People said, a hardcover sticker book, and you want $25? You know, when you think of a sticker book, you think of a little kind of pamphlet kind of thing. Maybe at most it would be $7 or $8. But these books are just exquisite. They really deliver. And once people started posting the first book on Instagram and YouTube and stuff, they just completely took off. They're great gifts for anyone. They're great for crafters or scrapbookers, but they're definitely not just for crafters. They're, one thing I've actually used them for is for wrapping presents. You can use these stickers instead of tape, or to, paste the ribbon on or whatever, and they just make the gift extra beautiful. And I honestly, you can literally put them on your coffee table and people will pick them up and ooh and ah over them. They're that beautiful. And as I mentioned, they're from authentic Victorian prints, and the new one, Bibliophilia, has a lot of book-related things, and then some quotes from great Victorian literature as well. And I have some of the samples on the slides there, a sample page or two. Okay, now I just want to squeeze in a couple of kids' books. I'm sorry, I'm running a little late. I could honestly do an entire hour on kids' books. We have so many great kids' books, but maybe they'll let me come back and do that sometime. But I've only got time for these two. They're both. These are both books for kids roughly between the ages of like 6 to 12. The first one, Willowdean, is a little older, what we in the business would call a middle grade novel for roughly ages 8 to 12. Catherine Applegate, the author, is a beloved kind of fixture of children's literature. She's written books like Wish Tree and Crenshaw, The One and Only Ivan, and she's won the Newbery Medal, which is pretty much the highest honor for a children's author. And Willowdean is a fantasy with a strong ecological message. The main character, Willowdean, is a 11-year-old girl, lives in this village called Perchance, and she is obsessed with these creatures called screechers that are native to the area. They're kind of like warthogs, and they smell bad and they're bad-tempered, and so the villagers kind of hunt them as nuisances, and they've gotten very rare. But she tracks them down and makes friends with them. And then there's this other migratory species called hummingbears that they kind of look like cute little winged teddy bears. And they're really important to the village because they bring visitors to the village for this big autumn fair every year when they come through the area. But the hummingbears have stopped coming back. And Willowdean figures out that there may be a connection between their disappearance and the screechers' disappearance. And since she's the one who understands the screechers best, she's the one to find out. So it all gets resolved in the end. The adults in the village step up to do the right thing, and we learn a good message about the environment. And Catherine Applegate she writes great characters, especially great non-human characters. She wrote a whole book. Her book Wish Tree was from the point of view of a tree and the animals that lived around it. So she has a real kind of facility with this, and these mythical animals are kind of great characters in their own rights. And it's just a delightful light fantasy world, great message, and beautiful line drawing illustrations throughout it. It's not a picture book, but it has these illustrations kind of sprinkled throughout the text. Finally, I'm just going to close out with a very silly book, Investigators. This is a graphic novel for kids ages 6 to 10. If you have a kid in that age range or know one, there's a pretty good chance you know about the Dogman books, which are total obsession. I have a 7-year-old daughter, and she's completely obsessed with Dogman. Their kids are desperate to have the new Dogman book as soon as it comes out and all that. These Investigators books are very much influenced by Dogman. We are very much trying to appeal to the kids who have read all those books to death and can't wait for the next one. They're about two alligator secret agents, and they foil various bad guys and save the world. And there's lots of stupid puns and sight gags and all kinds of really fun silliness along the way. This new one is book 4. You definitely don't have to start with book 1. They're not continuing storylines really, but I guarantee you once your kid reads 1, they're going to want all the other ones. So you might as well start at the beginning. I think I listed all the other ones on a slide there. And that is it. I'm so sorry to take so much time, and thank you for listening, and I hope you have some questions or not.
All right, Ben, thank you so much. I mean, I know it had to be difficult to pick just so many books with so many great titles that are out or coming out shortly. And I mean, I'm jotting down, I have 6 on a Post-it note already that I'm going to be purchasing personally as gifts for people. But if anyone has questions, you can feel free to pop them over in the chat box, or you can raise your virtual hand on Zoom here and I can unmute you so that you can ask Ben live. I haven't seen any questions come in yet. And if that is the case, I just want to remind everyone of the deals going on right now and the raffles that are so fun. So every book purchased tonight from Ben's list will earn you a raffle ticket towards both winning an advanced reader's copy, and then every book purchased will also earn you a raffle ticket towards winning a Louise Penny backlist bundle of 3 of her titles, which was one of the earlier slides in Ben's list. And then if you buy any 3 or more of the books on Ben's list tonight, you will receive a 15% discount by using Rep Night 15 during checkout. So some really cool, fun stuff going on at the store for these amazing titles as we're transitioning out of summer into the fall. I can't believe it. And before we know it, holidays. So Ben, I don't think we have any questions for our audience tonight. You did such a fantastic job giving us the background on these titles and these authors. There's just so much fun stuff to look forward to.
Great. Well, thanks again for having me, and thanks for listening to me, and for supporting RJ Julia.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for being with us tonight and joining us and sharing all of this fun and exciting content. Please, everyone, if you have questions, you can of course call the store. You can pop in the store. All of our booksellers are happy and excited to show you in person the books that were on Ben's list tonight. And thanks for being with us. Happy reading all, and have a fantastic night.